Have you ever noticed how everyone keeps telling us that we're living in the best time in history? We have technology at our fingertips, information on demand, and more choices than any generation before us. On paper, it sounds like paradise. But if that's true, why does it so often feel like something's missing? Why, in a world overflowing with options, do so many of us feel a quiet emptiness just beneath the surface? It's almost as if the more we have, the less we actually feel. We scroll through endless feeds, walk into stores packed with products, and fill our calendars with activities. Yet there's this subtle sense that none of it quite touches the part of us that's really hungry. Maybe you felt it too. That strange disconnect between what you're told you should feel and what you actually experience. Today, I want to dig into that feeling. I want to explore why, despite all our abundance, fulfillment seems so elusive. And to do that, let's start somewhere familiar. The supermarket. Because sometimes the best way to understand the big questions is to look at the small, everyday moments that shape our lives. Picture yourself walking into a supermarket. You're surrounded by aisles and aisles of choices, hundreds of cereal boxes, each one promising something different. Chocolate-flavored, gluten-free, organic, sugar-loaded, oat-based, keto-approved. At first glance, it feels empowering, almost exhilarating. So many options, so much freedom. You can pick whatever you want, right? But pause for a moment and ask yourself, who decided these were the cereals you could choose from in the first place? You didn't grow the grains. You didn't design the packaging. You didn't even question whether cereal was the best way to start your day. You just walked in and chose from what was already selected for you. And that's the thing. This is the modern illusion of freedom. We're told we live in a world of endless possibility, that we can be anyone, do anything, live however we choose. But in reality, the freedom we're sold is more like a children's menu, colorful, limited, and pre-approved. It's easy to confuse variety with freedom, but is having 50 brands of toothpaste to choose from really the same as being free? Or is it just a distraction, a way to keep us busy choosing between options that were curated long before we arrived? When you step back, you start to notice this pattern everywhere. Not just in supermarkets, but in the choices that shape our lives. And that's when the question starts to grow. If our options are always pre-selected, how free are we really? When you look closer, you start to see that the boundaries of our choices aren't just in supermarkets, they're everywhere. Take your career, for example. You're told you can be anything you want, but the options that are truly supported, celebrated, or even financially viable are already filtered by the system. Want to be a poet? Sure, but only if you can turn your art into profit. The message is subtle but clear. Be who you want, but only if it fits within what's considered economically useful. Even our opinions are shaped by invisible walls. There's this concept called the Overton window, the range of ideas that are seen as acceptable in public discourse. You can say whatever you want as long as it doesn't make people too uncomfortable or challenge the structure itself. Step outside those lines and suddenly your freedom to speak starts to shrink, and it goes deeper. Even rebellion, that urge to break free, is often packaged and sold back to us. There's a brand for every kind of nonconformity, a playlist, an aesthetic, a hashtag. The system is clever. It lets you feel like you're choosing, even when the choices are already boxed in. This curated freedom doesn't just shape what we buy or believe, it quietly molds who we think we are. Consumerism is a master illusionist. It sells us the idea that freedom is about having endless products to choose from, endless trends to follow, endless ways to express ourselves. You can pick your clothes, your coffee, your phone wallpaper, your playlist, each one promising to say something unique about who you are. But if you look beneath the surface, you start to see that these choices are less about freedom and more about performance. We're encouraged to curate our lives, to build an identity out of things we buy and the trends we chase, as if authenticity is just another product on the shelf. True freedom isn't about picking from 1,000 flavors of the same idea. It's about having the power to step back and ask, why do I want this in the first place? Who benefits from my choices? But that kind of questioning isn't encouraged because it threatens the system that profits from our constant need to define ourselves through consumption. And so, our sense of self becomes a performance. something to be marketed, polished, and liked. We're not just living, we're curating a narrative, always aware of the audience, always performing. This performance doesn't stop at what we buy or how we look. It seeps into how we work, how we measure our worth, and how we chase meaning. And that's where the culture of productivity steps in, turning even our time and energy into something to be optimized and displayed. Somewhere along the way, society convinced us that our value is measured by how much we do. Productivity became a badge of honor, and busyness turned into a kind of status symbol. We celebrate the grinders, the hustlers, the people who never stop moving, as if constant achievement is the only path to meaning. The message is everywhere. Your worth is tied to your output, and if you're not producing, you're falling behind. This mindset seeps into every corner of our lives. Even our moments of rest are hijacked by the need to be useful. Reading a book, going for a walk, track your steps, doing nothing, that's laziness, unless you can rebrand it as mindful recovery. We've forgotten how to simply exist without an agenda, without a purpose, without trying to prove something. The psychological impact is profound. When your identity is built on being productive, rest feels like failure, and stillness feels like guilt. You start to believe that you have to earn your right to relax, that you have to justify your existence through constant doing. But what happens when you stop? Who are you when you're not performing, not producing, not chasing the next goal? That's the question that lingers in the quiet moments, the one that can feel both terrifying and liberating, and it leads us to a deeper exploration of who we really are, beneath all the roles and labels we've been given. Who are you really when you strip away all the labels? It's a simple question, but try to answer it and you'll notice how quickly your mind reaches for titles and roles. I'm a student, a manager, a parent, an artist, an introvert, an achiever. We speak in these terms as if they fully define us, but where did these identities come from? Did we truly choose them, or were they handed to us, like uniforms on the first day of school? From the moment we're born, the world starts shaping our sense of self. Our gender is assigned, our culture is stamped onto us, our names are repeated until we internalize them as me. We learn what's praised and what's punished, what gets us love and what brings disapproval, and we adjust ourselves accordingly. Little by little, the raw, unfiltered version of who we are is traded for something safer, something more acceptable. A version that fits neatly into a world that doesn't like mess or mystery. But identity isn't something we discover. It's something we construct, often without even realizing it. Social media, education, advertising, they don't just reflect who we are, they tell us who we should be. We curate our lives, filter our faces, and post our stories, always performing, always seeking validation. The difference between the authentic self and the roles we play for acceptance grows wider with every scroll, every like, every carefully chosen word. To rediscover who we truly are, we have to step away from the constant performance and the comfort of fitting in. We have to be willing to sit in the quiet, to let go of the need to impress, and to listen for the voice that's been drowned out by all the noise. And that means facing a new kind of discomfort, the kind that comes from stepping outside the familiar and into the unknown. We all love comfort, the soft bed, the hot shower, the instant food, the one-click delivery. It feels good, safe, familiar. But comfort, when left unquestioned, can quietly become a cage. It dulls our edges, numbs our instincts, and slowly erodes the very drive that leads to growth and self-awareness. Every innovation seems designed to make life easier, to remove friction, to smooth out the rough spots. But it's in those moments of friction, of discomfort, that real change happens. That's where our minds stretch, our identities evolve, and our connections deepen. When everything is made easy, we lose our tolerance for challenge, for boredom, for silence. Even the smallest discomfort can feel unbearable, so we avoid it at all costs. But in doing so, we also avoid the opportunities to reflect, to question, to grow. Comfort isn't evil, but when it goes unexamined, it lulls us into a kind of sleepwalking, where we stop noticing how disconnected we become from ourselves. And it's in those quiet, undisturbed moments, when the noise fades and the distractions fall away, that we start to sense a deeper emptiness, a subtle longing for something more real. This emptiness doesn't shout, it just quietly settles in, like a room that used to be filled with music, but now echoes with silence. It creeps in during those rare moments when the distractions finally go still. When you're driving alone or lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, it's subtle but unmistakable, a sense that somewhere along the way, you've lost touch with something essential inside yourself. Modern life is relentless in its busyness. From the moment we wake up, we're plugged in, scheduled, and performing. The world applauds the version of us that's most useful, most productive, most polished. But in all that noise, it's easy to forget who we were before the labels, before the roles, before the need to always be on. We become strangers to our own inner world, too busy to remember what truly matters to us. But here's the hope. The journey back to yourself is possible. It doesn't require a dramatic life change. It starts with small, intentional acts, moments where you choose to pause, to listen, to reconnect. And in those moments, you begin to remember that you are more than your output, more than your performance. You are simply yourself. Reclaiming your true self doesn't have to be a grand gesture. It can begin with the smallest acts of defiance against the noise. Try sitting in silence, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Let your thoughts wander without reaching for your phone or another distraction. Write something just for yourself, not to post, not to impress, but simply to feel your own thoughts again. Say no when you mean it, not because it's efficient or expected, but because it's honest. Allow yourself to embrace stillness, to do nothing, and notice that you are still worthy, even in those quiet moments. These small choices are powerful. They remind you that your worth isn't something you have to earn through productivity or performance. It's not measured by likes, achievements, or how busy you are. It's inherent, woven into your very being. The more you practice these moments of self-connection, the more you begin to see through the illusions that once held you captive. And as your self-awareness grows, so does your sense of freedom, real freedom, the kind that comes from knowing and accepting yourself just as you are. This is where transformation truly begins. When you wake up to the illusions, the curated choices, the productivity trap, the comfort cage, you become dangerous, but in the best possible way. Dangerous to systems that profit from your disconnection, to narratives that depend on your obedience, to the idea that you must always perform to be worthy. Because once you see the illusion, you can never unsee it. You stop chasing what doesn't matter and start choosing what does. You become someone who can't be easily controlled, someone who lives from a place of genuine freedom. This journey back to yourself isn't always easy, but it is the most liberating act you can undertake. It's not about rejecting the world, but about seeing it clearly and choosing your place within it with intention. When you reclaim your own voice, your own values, your own sense of worth, you begin to live in a way that's deeply alive, deeply human. So if you're feeling that quiet emptiness, know that you're not alone. The path back to yourself is open, waiting, and it starts with a single step. Welcome back to your own life. We've missed you.